Okay, one more question, also from China. In meditating and doing Chan, it seems that he or she is distracted by sounds. Always the sounds outside, even the sound of the frogs. He keeps hearing all the sounds. How can he focus, or she?
Well, yeah, it's of course, Guan Yin's Chan was at the ear organ, right? So if anybody's read the Shurangama, you'll know that it's really interesting that Guan Yin's practice was the Chan of the ear organ, was where sound arises at the ear organ. So whatever senses, we have all these senses, and they're operating. And then the ear sense we know is always open, whereas the eyes we can close. The reason that Guan Yin chose that practice, and the Buddha said that was a great practice, was because that organ is always open. And because that organ is always open, it's always taking in sense data. The ears are always taking in sense data. So that can be very, on one hand, you could either see it as a distraction. On the other hand, you could see it as a place to observe the mind. So you can turn that around and actually observe. So between the frogs quirking, quacking, and the garbage coming by and so forth, there's moments of stillness, and then there's moments of activity, of ear activity. So remember that ultimately Chan is having the same mind of the sound as the mind that's in stillness, as silence. The mind is not different. In the Shurangama, there's a really great practice, ringing the bell. For those people who read the Shurangama, there's an example that's given it where the bell's rung, and then what did you hear? And he said, I heard the sound of the bell. And then there's quiet. Then he hears quiet. Then he hits the bell. And then he says, what did you hear? I heard a bell. And then it gets quiet. And what's trying to be pointed out is the mind that we're looking for, the Chan mind that we're looking for, is the same mind, is exactly the same mind, the same awareness in the sound as it is in the silence. There's no difference in the Chan mind between the sound and the silence. It's exactly the same mind. And so actually having sounds can actually be interesting in cultivation, because they can actually force you to stay even more concentrated, to find the place where the mind stays the same, or where the mind is the same when it's in sound or in silence. Just being in Chan and silence won't get you there. It gives you practice in listening to silence. But until you take that silence, and until you take that mind into activity, you're not doing Chan. You're doing an artificial state of stillness, of silence. Now you have to do that. I'm not saying not to do that. I really, really love silence. I love to sit in silence, and I have very quiet places I sit, and I really like to listen to the silence with my hearing. I'm really a hedonist. Listening to the stillness with the ears is really a luxury, right? But I also know that whatever I achieve in listening to stillness and the concentration I get there doesn't really mean too much until I can bring that same mind to the rest of the activity I'm doing and all the other activities. So it's could be a disadvantage, but in the long term, you'll always have to come back to working on the mind that's both in stillness and in activity, and finding the common mind in both, where the mind is common in both activity and stillness.
Okay, Doug, we have one more question.